Hello and welcome to all of the 911 grantees. This video will explain how and when to use Standard Form 270 as part of the vouchering process for the 911 grant program. I'll be running through how to use the form and when. So before we go right to the form, let's talk a little bit about the when, in air quotes. The 911 grant program is a reimbursable grant program, and that means that rather than receiving all of the grant funds up front, you will be expected to submit vouchers for the reimbursement as you incur expenses. The vouchering process will include two steps: submitting this Standard Form 270 via the nitsa.national911@dot.gov email address, and submitting the necessary information via the 911 Grants Tracking System, or the GTS. The use of the Grants Tracking System has been covered by separate webinars, and we encourage you to take a look at the archived version if you have not had a chance. That Grants Tracking System will electronically be connected to your bank account, and once we approve your invoices, you will be electronically paid, or the funds will be electronically transferred to your account. So that's a really important thing to know. Requests for reimbursement may be submitted as frequently as every month. And for those of you that are state grantees and have sub-grantees, you are responsible for collecting and compiling all expenses, invoices, and vouchers from contractors and/or sub-grantees. So your request for reimbursement should reflect the total expenses for each state grantee as you are submitting them. So let's take a look at the form. As you can see, the name of this form is Request for Advance or Reimbursement. And while the form can be used for both purposes, the 911 grant program will use it only for reimbursement. That's part of the reason why we're providing this video. We'll walk you through that, and we'll provide a few examples of how to use the form. This page 1 of the form is largely information about your agency, and most of that information won't change from one voucher to another. I'm going to scroll down to the second page of Standard Form 270, and starting with item number 11, where it says computation of amount of reimbursement requested, that's the part of the form that will change with every voucher. Probably the best way to demonstrate how to use the form might be to walk you through a few use cases or a few scenarios. So let's do that. Let's go to the use cases first. Okay, so for voucher number 1, or use case scenario number 1, as you know, the grant program announced awards on August 9th of 2019. In this parallel universe, we are now at November 1st of 2019, and you as the grantee have been working on a project, and so far you've received invoices totaling $100,000. You as the grantee are submitting the first voucher to do two things. Number 1, to report the $50,000 match, and to request reimbursement for the remaining $50,000 from your federal funds. So let's walk you through the Standard Form 270 for the scenario. Remember that it's $100,000 total split between a $50,000 match and $50,000 of federal funds. First, let's go to the first page. There are just a few things that are important to remember about this first page of the Standard Form 270. Number 1, the type of payment requested will always be reimbursement. This is not a grant program that allows advances, so it'll always be reimbursement. And up until your very last or your closing invoice, you'll be checking partial. Number 2, the basis of request is always cash. Number 3, the federal sponsoring agency will be USDOT/NHTSA. The federal grant or identifying number assigned by the federal agency will be NHTSA 2019 E911. Number 5, the payment request number. This is basically the voucher number. So since this is your first voucher, it's voucher number 1. 6 is the employee ID number, which you know and have submitted on your application. And 7 is an account number or any identifying number that you assign to this grant for whatever your own purposes are. Number 7 is really only for your use as the grantee and not required by a federal agency. So if you don't want to assign any type of particular specific number, you don't have to. You can leave that blank. Number 8, the period covered by this request. So this would be the dates of this voucher. As I said, the grant program started or the awards were made on August 9th, and we are saying that it is November 1st. So that is the period covered by this request. And then for number 9, it's really all of your agency's demographic information. One important thing to remember is that there are really only 2 items that will change on this front page. Number 5, the payment number. So as you submit your invoices, that number will increase. And then the dates covered by the request. Those will change every time you submit a voucher. Okay, let's go back to that use case scenario for just a minute, just to review the numbers. Remember, the total amount that has been incurred in expenses so far is $100,000. And the grantee is reporting a $50,000 match and requesting $50,000 in federal funds. Okay, with that in mind, let's move to the second page of Standard Form 270. A couple of things for you to know. This is one of those fillable PDFs, so the form should do the math for you, and that will help. The form is also designed to help you track the amount of match that you have made to date with every voucher. So all of us together will be able to track how much you have been able to provide in terms of matching funds. So let's walk through this form for this first use case or this first scenario. So the date is November 1st. The total outlays to date, we said, were $100,000. Now, this program will never have income, so B is always 0, which means that the net program outlays are $100,000. And as I said, the form will do the math for you, so this will just be filled in, but just so you know what each item means. As I mentioned before, this form will never be used for advances, so this next one, 11D, is always 0, which means that the total is $100,000. The non-federal share, or the match, is $50,000. The federal share is also $50,000 in this case. Since this is the first voucher, there have been no payments previously requested, so this would be 0, and the federal share now requested is $50,000. These amounts should automatically transfer to this total column because it's a fillable PDF. The only other thing that you need to do on this page 2 of Standard Form 270 is provide a signature, and then you can see here the typed or printed name and title of the person that is filling out the form. Okay, let's go back to the use case scenarios for these vouchers, and we'll talk about voucher number 2. So in our parallel universe, it is now 3 months later, or it's February 1st, and you've continued to work on the grant project, and now you've incurred an additional $200,000 in expenses. Of that $200,000, $50,000 was covered by state match, so that's an additional $50,000. and $150,000 is being requested in federal funds. So on this voucher number 2, you're reporting an additional $50,000 match, and you're asking for a reimbursement of $150,000. So let's take a look at voucher number 2. Here's voucher number 2, and as I mentioned before, on page 1 of the voucher, the only 2 things that will change are items number 5 and items number 8. So for this one, since it is the second voucher, it is voucher number 02, and the dates covered by this request are November 2nd till February 1st. Those are really the only 2 items that will change on that first page. So let's move to page 2 of Standard Form 270 for this second voucher. You can see here that as on page 1, the date is February 1st, and now the total program outlays to date total $300,000. This first part is actually pretty easy because income is always 0, so that means that C is $300,000. As I said before, there's never any advance, so that's always 0. So the total is $300,000. For line F, the non-federal share of the amount, again, just a reminder, we're doing the total match to date. So now the total amount of match is $100,000, which means that the federal share of the amount on line E is $200,000. Since you've already requested $50,000 in voucher number 1, you are now requesting $150,000. And as I mentioned before, those totals will be automatically transposed to the total column. As I mentioned before, the only other thing you need to do with this Standard Form 270 page 2 is the signature page and the printed name and the title of the person that is providing the signature. Okay, let's move on to voucher number 3. So again, in our parallel universe, it's now a year later. It's August 10th of 2020, so we've been at this for a year. The grantee has incurred an additional $500,000 in expenses since that second voucher was submitted. Now for this $500,000 expense, an additional $50,000 is provided in match, and you're asking for reimbursement for $450,000 in federal funds. So on this third voucher, you're going to be doing 2 things. You're going to be reporting an additional $50,000 match, and you're going to be asking for reimbursement for $450,000. So for this third voucher, again, just to review, the only 2 things that will change on page 1 are items number 5 and item number 8. Number 5, the payment request number for this is number 3, since it's voucher number 3. And the dates that are covered by this request are November 2nd to August 10th of 2020. Moving right along to page 2 of this third voucher, the date as above is August 10th of 2020. The total amount that has been spent on this project to date is $800,000. Income is always 0, which means C is $800,000. Advance is always 0. So the total that has been expended on this project to date is $800,000. Just a reminder that we are reporting the match to date. So you as the grantee, you are tracking the amount of match you've provided to date on this line, which now is $150,000. And if you do the math, that means that the federal share of the amount on line E is $650,000. With the first 2 vouchers, you've already requested $200,000 in federal funds. So right now on this voucher, you're requesting an additional $450,000. And again, The only other thing that we request on this page 2 is the signatures and the name and the date and the title of the person that is providing the signature. As I said in the beginning of this video, all of these will be submitted via the nitsa.national911@dot.gov email address. And this process will just repeat itself for the duration of the grant's period of performance. The only big difference, and we will remind you when you get to this point, is that the final voucher will be marked as such on page 1. So item number 1B will become the final voucher. Otherwise, there isn't a whole lot of difference on this first page. As always, if you have any questions, please just let us know. Kate Elkins and I, Lori Flaherty, will be your primary points of contact for these questions, and you can reach both of us either at our individual email addresses or via that nitsa.national911@dot.gov email address. Or, frankly, if getting on the phone for a few minutes to talk through something would be helpful, just let us know. We'd be happy to do that. This concludes this webinar for the 911 grant program. Thank you so much.